I'm Mark Andrus, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm excited to welcome Mark Andrus to the show. Mark is the owner of Ocama, the newly opened boutique hotel and private villa retreat nestled in the lush jungle of Las Galeras on the northeastern coast of the Dominican Republic. Prior to opening Ocama, Mark co-founded Stacy's Pita Chips, the beloved brand that grew from a Boston street cart into a household name before being acquired by PepsiCo. After the acquisition, Mark spent years immersing himself in the world of hospitality, studying everything from architecture to interior design, and of course, guest experience. When he discovered the land on which Ocama now sits, he committed to building sustainably, incorporating living green roofs and natural, locally sourced materials throughout to result in a space that is serene as it is luxurious. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. That was a great introduction and a great description of the place.
It's easy to give you a great introduction because you have one of the most unexpected career paths of any hotelier I've spoken to. Before hospitality and even before Pita Chips, which we definitely need to talk about, you completed a 5-year doctoral program in psychology in Hawaii, no less. So much to talk about right there alone. Can you take us back to that chapter of your life and maybe what you were envisioning for your career at that point?
Sure. Yeah, it's gone very circuitous. I was a kid that loved to cook. My passion was cooking from a very early age. Kids were most slapping together a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I was making these gourmet omelets and all. I just had a knack for cooking. So when I got to high school and it got time to pick colleges, I decided I wanted to go to cooking school. And I come from a family of doctors. And so that was sort of, they thought that was amusing, but that I should get a regular education, a more formal education first, and then I could do what I wanted to do. So
Right.
Like a good son, I went to 4 years of undergraduate, and I seemed to like psychology, and I thought, well, I could get a doctorate in that. I'd be a doctor, but not a medical doctor, but it was still. So then I continued on and did 4 years of graduate school and then a year postdoc, which I spent in Hawaii. And even during that time, I'd go to restaurants and I just had this passion still for food and the food business. And I knew I still needed to at least explore that. I didn't want to have regrets later in life.
Yeah.
And so when I finished up that 5th year, I was now thoroughly broke. I had spent everything I had on higher education, but I still wanted to try at least. And I was dating my girlfriend at the time was Stacy. She had been a social worker, and she was sort of tired of that position and was happy to explore going into the hospitality in some way, whether it was a restaurant or. And so we moved back to the East Coast in the middle of winter with no money, scraped up enough to put together a food cart. And I designed a bunch of sandwiches, healthy sandwiches. You couldn't find those in Boston for a quick bite to eat. You could find hot dogs and burritos. You couldn't find, great healthy pita bread. And we made these roll-up sandwiches, and they became an instant hit. Lines out the door. And to keep people in line, I started to bake off the pita chips. And that's when people said, wow, these are really good. How come we can't buy these in the store? And so I said, maybe maybe that's a good, a good route to take instead of a restaurant. And so we started exploring that, and we learned how to start a company and a pita chip company, snack company, and bought our first equipment, got loans, and yeah, and then 10 years later, we were fortunate enough that it grew and the brand grew, and we sold it to Pepsi. And and during that time, I all of a sudden was able to start buying my own properties, houses, instead of renting. And so I got into interior design, and I became fascinated with that. And with architecture, I was able to travel now. So I traveled to some wonderful hotels, and
Mhm.
really was fascinated with how those operated in service, and how they, brought together food and service, and landscaping and design and everything all together, all these passions that I had. And I said, maybe for my next thing, it it could be fun to do a small resort of some sort or something. I hadn't really envisioned what it was,
Mhm.
whether it was going to be a friends and family sort of compound, which seemed a little bit selfish to me rather than something bigger. But I hadn't, so I put on a backpack and went through Central America and the Caribbean for 9 months looking for a piece of land that would remind me of the beauty of Hawaii, where the had these beautiful palm-studded mountains going down to the beautiful water in the bay. And I loved Hawaii, but it was so far away from home. I wanted to find something closer.
Closer.
And I found some beautiful places, but nothing really fit all the check marks until someone said, try the Dominican Republic. And I got there and I liked it. And then someone said, try the Samaná Peninsula. And so I made my way to the Samaná Peninsula and all the way out 60 kilometers to the very end, which overlooks this national park and this Playa Rincon Bay. And I knew, as soon as I saw that, I said, okay, this spot has so much beauty and a spiritual quality to it, and cultural, and and the views it had, was protected. It was a little ahead of the game because it was tough to get there, and it wasn't really built out at all. It was mostly all, but I knew that had my heart right there. And so that was probably 14 years ago that I came upon this, and I started putting together, meeting people, then putting together the land deals where I could acquire uh, a good bit of land. But it was tied up with about 300 locals, so it took probably 7-8 years to actually put that 35 acres together. And then at that time, I was planning what the property would look like. Very low impact, set into the jungle, so you can barely see the places. And I got, in my traveling, I was fortunate enough to go to some Four Seasons in Bali and some Omans, and I saw some live green roofs, and I sort of like a recipe. I took little bits of things I liked at each place. Service was a big thing. Some places had terrible service, some had great service, and how were they accomplishing that? And it was very fun research. But it was all very helpful in designing what I was going to do with Ocama.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then I decided I was going to start off with a very low impact, very manageable program of just 8 villas, a central kitchen, commercial kitchen and office, and then a meeting place, sort of check-in, check-out meeting, employee housing, some beautiful roads going through the property, and all the water and electricity, which you have to bring in from quite a ways off.
Yeah.
So it took 4 or 5 years of construction, and again, a gringo doing this abroad was a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
It was a big learning curve, but it finally was finished, and it opened it up as a Airbnb just to sort of test the waters
Mm-hmm.
and start getting to building a staff, but also started to generate some income. And we did
Yeah.
that for about a year and a half, gathered about 250 five-star reviews. People loved the place, and built a great kitchen staff and a concierge staff and hosts, and really the team did a great job of sort of low-level interviewing our guests as they left to make sure we were covering our bases moving forward and making the proper changes of, how can we better their stay. So now we have the 8 villas that run, beautifully as this small, very intimate boutique hotel, very luxury, but also very barefoot at the same time. So a nice combination there. You feel like a big kid in this jungle with these panoramic views. Every villa, all the 8 villas have, they're elevated up 60 or 70 feet above this bay. And so you have these wide open views that are just breathtaking. We've got a great chef, a great staff. So it's come a long way. It's
Mark, there is so much in what you just said. I mean, that is almost 3 lifetimes. Like, there's so much that we need to talk about. So let's go back to when you talked about starting Stacy's Pita Chips. So first of all, I feel like kids around the world are going to love that clip of you, because they're going to be like, hey, mom and dad, I don't need to be a doctor or a lawyer. Let me follow my passion, and I might find the next or found the next Stacy's Pita Chips with an acquisition by PepsiCo. I mean, it's such a great testament to, if you had been allowed to do what you wanted to do right away. I mean, clearly it was destined for success.
Yeah, I think I worry if people ask, like, are you sad that you spent all that time in school when you could have been going right after high school? And for me, it really, I don't think I would have been prepared quite mentally, or I think I learned discipline in college and graduate school, my communication skills, my ability to research. I picked up a lot of life experiences and educational experiences.
Sure. Like, everything along the way had to happen in that way to get you to where you ended up. And, I think psychology is a perfect degree, because you need that in everything. That's just how we communicate and deal with others. So when you and Stacy opened the cart, you said it was pretty much an instant success. What made it, besides the fact that the product was so good, were you doing anything in terms of like marketing, branding, etc.? Or was it really just we opened, we had a great product, and people loved it?
Yeah, that was back in, so the cart, 95, I guess, that we had the cart. So social media wasn't a thing. It wasn't, which is interesting, because that was a very different business than my current hotel business, because the landscape has changed. But it was just the time, like I tell so many people, the timing was perfect. I think, people were starting to think more along the lines of being healthy, but yet all these employees that were downtown Crossing area Boston couldn't get a fast, they only had X amount of time to eat lunch, but fast food around there was very unhealthy. So, we capitalized on that demand, and it just, and we had a great product. It was a really good product. It was fun. We made them, it was a cart that you don't usually see. It was a cold cart. So we had ice in this bin. We had the whole thing designed and made, ice and then we had sort of salad bar containers that got set in, so people could come and pick all these gourmet deli meats. And we went to food shows to supply the cart. So it was a very gourmet. From my bartending days, I had speed racks for all the dressings up on top. So it was sort of a show too. And we hit the timing perfectly. And the same thing with the pita chips. There was really, there was Cape Cod potato chips. There were a lot of great potato and tortilla chips. There wasn't a baked, healthier chip. And and something sort of pita bread was just getting known. So that sort of helped also. So pita chips was this novelty that, again, the timing was perfect.
Yeah, you spent the time designing the cart and, as you said, going to food shows to make sure you were getting the right ingredients and everything. Did you think our food carts are going to be the success and that we're going to have a food cart empire? Or were you just like, we're going to do this one food cart and we're going to do it great? Like, was there a master plan or a big
The
dream?
initial impetus was, this is our step. We don't have any money. We can't open a restaurant.
Right.
If I had stumbled on money, I would have probably tried to open a restaurant right away. I'm glad it happened in this stepping stone.
Right.
So the thing was to have the cart, very low overhead, to get into the market and experience it, try to make some money, and then lily pad our way up to a restaurant.
Right.
And it just so happened that, along the way, the pita chips entered the scene. And that's why I tell people also, don't get too, blinded by what you think you need to do, or that focus. Always remain flexible to possibilities, because so many people miss those because they think it's got to be a cart. It's got to be the restaurant. This is the way it needs to go. If I had been thinking like that, I would have missed that opportunity to do the pita chips.
Exactly. That's what I love about that story. You brought the pita chips to the people because you wanted to keep them in line for the cart, but you were able to be flexible enough to recognize those might have had a bigger tailwind, than the cart itself. So I guess, what was that next step that you saw these pita chips were, catching fire, beloved by the people who were waiting? What made you think, hey, let's really focus on actually bringing those to market?
Well, I thought of how challenging it would be. Well, at this point in time, actually, we were getting approached. We had a Rolodex, or a box on the front that said, interested in investing, and people loved this card so much. We had the box stuffed, and these were all financial people around us, but they saw that it was, a cash cow. And so I think the next thing was possible rollout, having investors come in and do a healthy drive-through fast food, a franchise, or however it was going to go. So that was the thinking. But at the same time, I thought, well, these pita chip people really love them. They'd love to be able to get them. We would only have to build one central factory and we could hit the whole United States. Whereas how many restaurants do we have to build, and how much capital is that? Had I known how challenging and expensive it was to build factories, I would have maybe thought, but sometimes it's best not to know everything going into a situation and the work. You look back at all the work and you say, how did I do that? But you do it as, the excitement builds. So yeah, it was, so that was the sort of question route that we answered and went that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just researching, Stacy took a business class, and I started researching how to get salespeople, and from that point on, we just found out how to build a factory. We started with actually the corner of the Boston pretzel company. So they had ovens that were these special convection ovens that would be perfect for our pita chips. We started using the small convection ovens. That's how I developed the product. So I approached the woman who owned it, and I said, hey, when are you not using these ovens, and can we rent space? And so that's how we actually started, and then built to our own small factory. And then by the end, we had bought the Sealy mattress factory that went out of business. And it was this huge 250,000 square foot facility that we made state of the art. And we had the biggest pita bread line in the United States in our factory, just to make the pita bread for the pita chips. It was exciting.
And when did PepsiCo enter the group chat?
Yeah, well, we started to build steam as soon as we went above the radar. We one of our first we were treading water for a while, and then I thought, well, Trader Joe's is such a beast, was that back then, and still is.
Yeah.
And I said, maybe I can approach them. They almost do all private label with our chips, and we can make Trader Joe's chips for them, and that way we can get in some income to continue building. And there was a little bit of concern that we'd lose some brand power,
Yeah.
but I thought it was the right move anyhow. And I approached them, and they actually loved the product, and they took them in, and we ended up getting in all of the Trader Joe's and doing their pita chips. So from that point on, we never had to take on any investment. Trader Joe's paid for all of the expansion. And then I was able to approach Costco, and that was where we really, really got above the radar. And that's when, we got a call 8.5, 9 years into it from Frito-Lay. I answered the phone somehow, and it was Frito-Lay. No, it was Kraft Foods saying, we're interested in buying your company. And I couldn't believe it. And then a couple days later, Pepsi called, and then a number of people. The brand had just really, not only were we doing a lot of sales, but the brand, it was such a well-known and loved brand, and people loved the story in the back. We had, in the beginning, I don't think they have it anymore, but we had our whole card story on the back, and people really gravitated toward that.
Definitely. What I'm also so impressed by is, like you said, this was in the 90s. So when you had to figure out all these things along the way, whether it be how do we mass produce the chips, to how do we build a factory, to how do I negotiate with PepsiCo and Frito-Lay, you didn't have ChatGPT or the technology that we have at our fingertips. And like you said, you had been studying psychology. So I'm sure that played a role in especially these conversations. But how did you navigate at each turn? I know you mentioned Stacy took a business course at one point, but how were you figuring things out along each step of the way?
Yeah, well, it was good. That's a good question, because I had to think back on that. A lot of it was research. Again, really researching the heck out of things online, but also, and I tell people this as well, find good mentors. And I found some really good mentors. The guys when we were starting, just the very beginning, when I was even doing research on how to start a snack food company, I looked up all the successful, Cape Cod potato chips, and I got to meet Steve Bernard, and he showed me the factory. And I tried to approach things with cooperation and not competition. And some people would close you out and weren't into they were just a little too competitive. But there were a lot of great folks that opened their doors, like Steve Bernard and the guys from Terra Chips. They had just sold a little while ago, so it was even less. And I called them up and asked them if I could pick their brains for a while, and they gave me some incredibly good information that saved me a lot of headaches down the road. So that was huge. And I was pointed in the right directions. And again, I think psychology helped with that, with networking, because it was all about networking, and it was much more people oriented than it is now. Actually, what I think it's more challenging now with the hotel company, because it is all Chat GPT, and it is, you don't even know now if you're talking to someone or if it's a chatbot, or they're sending you, a letter that was just generated from some, an AI, that it's really so. Whereas I was doing a lot more traveling, but you'd travel out, you'd shake someone's hands, you'd meet with someone, you'd have the product, they'd taste the product. It was very hands-on.
That's so interesting, because when you were saying that, I was going to say, I bet you have loved that part of the hospitality industry, because that's something I've always been really taken by, that spirit of cooperation, that you can tour competitor hotels and it's not like this big secret thing. It's kind of like, we're all in this together. How can we serve guests better? So have you seen that as well? Or like you said, has it been much more at an arm's length?
I think it's much more, it's to me at an arm's length. I'm not as familiar with it yet. A lot of it has been the planning and the design, and that's the fun. And actually, at this point, I'm looking at partnering with uh, larger hotel brands for the expansion because I'm only using a very small part of my property, and it really can't. 8 villas on 55 acres. That's the 35 plus the 25 is a lot of land. There's 3 beaches. So really, the idea for the beginning was to get it to sort of prove the concept, get it to a certain point, have fun designing and building this dream, and then handing the controls off to someone else. A
Yeah.
large luxury brand that could then, with my same vision, it's still an area that's for low impact and for sustainability and all that, and those would be the brands I'd be looking at partnering with to then do the next phase, which would be a full proper hotel and a spa and residences probably. So, and that's actually I've been talking to some folks already.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to spend some more time talking about Ocama, but just to kind of round out on Stacy's Pita chips, after the acquisition by PepsiCo, like you said, you're looking around, you had this state-of-the-art facility, you've been acquired by one of the biggest companies in the world. How did you feel after that sale?
It was very surreal. It was because the sacrifices I had made along the way, not only for you know, possibly throwing, like people would say, throwing away all that education, that money, and all that time. Have my parents tell their friends, "Oh, how's Mark, the psychologist, doing?" Well, he's working at a food cart now. And people are thinking of, "Oh my gosh, what's happened?" I wanted to make sure I was following my passion and to hopefully one day be able to pay back my student loans. That was my
That
thing.
was your
So
goal.
to 10 years later to have had that level of success was very surreal and almost scary in a way because you hear of the horror stories of people, all of a sudden having a lot of money and going off the deep end or whatever. I was sure that wasn't going to happen, but it's scary to all of a sudden have this responsibility of all this money and to then and to be done. I was before that time I'd always been going to graduate school or college or starting a pita chip company or working in internships, and now all of a sudden I was a free agent sort of.
Yeah.
So I knew, I took a little time off and traveled, but I knew I needed to get back. I started to immediately do free consulting for startup food companies to give back. So
Wow.
that was one thing I did, and I did some traveling and stuff, but immediately the wheels started turning and it seemed like travel, something incorporating travel and food seemed right.
That was something I was struck by when you were giving the kind of overview of the story was you kind of very quickly said, and what would be my next thing? And part of me thought, weren't you just like, I'm so tired. I'm just going to like sit on a beach and read some books and relax for a few years. But it sounds like right away you knew you needed to put that creative energy someplace else.
Yeah, and I did. I mean, I spent a little bit of time traveling and having downtime, but you can only have so much downtime and vacation, and you get, at least I do, you get antsy a little bit.
Right.
So I needed to, and everyone else, all your friends are working, your family, everyone's working. So there's more to be done.
Ocama means to listen in the
Yes.
Taino language. Why was that the right name for this property? And I imagine the right philosophy as well.
Yeah. For a number of reasons. I wanted to sort of pay homage to the people that originally lived there and that were such kind and peaceful as I learned about the Taino and the inhabitants of that region. They were very kind. They were very spiritual. They really cared about the environment. They weren't warring. They weren't, combative. They were just very peaceful. And so I wanted to pay tribute to them. I knew that from the start. And then it was picking the name. And when you're on the property, all you hear is the waves and the the birds, a lot of which are endemic to that area, and you can only find there. The insects, you're just hit with the sounds of nature that is this symphony that is amazing. And our philosophy is to get in tune with nature and to unplug. Life is fast and there's so much information being jammed at you that we want you to come to Ocama and be hugged by the rainforest and just to unplug. We don't have TVs in the villas. It's all about listening to nature, and sometimes it takes people a couple days, but it really is such a cleansing experience. And so to listen, that word just really embodied what it was all about.
And you had said too, like after the acquisition and everything, when you kind of knew that this was what you wanted to do, at least in broad strokes, you had set off with the backpack and you traveled all around. I'm always so impressed how people just figure things out. You stumble upon this land, you think it's beautiful and make a perfect place. What is that first step in terms of finding out who owns it and how to acquire land in a country where you don't live, where you don't speak the language?
Yeah. Yeah, it's again using your people skills. And I found a local Argentinian guy who had moved to the area years before and became friends with him. He was sort of in the hospitality business at the time and the land business, sort of. He was sort of a mover and shaker and an entrepreneur. And he knew everyone. And so he was instrumental. My lawyer knew a lot of people. He was extremely helpful. But you make mistakes and you have, problems along the way. The first architect that I had draw my vision, I knew exactly how I wanted them set and materials look, but I needed an architect and engineers. And I interviewed 3 different architectural firms through my research, 2 that were from the Dominican and 1 that was Argentinian Swiss. And I ended up liking that person's renderings the best, and they're sort of how they took my vision into fruition. And so I went with my gut. I went with him, and he ended up being extremely corrupt in the end. So you never know. And I had to find, took a number of steps back after starting forward with him. So you do make mistakes along the way, like anything else, but you try to talk to people. And the same thing as the pita chips. I also tried to, when I was traveling, I tried to talk to people and people that had hotels. And there was a little trickier. I wasn't talking to hotel owners, but I'd be interviewing concierges and managers in a very low level way. So, and just, again, just researching and researching and researching. So I had a pretty good idea by the time things get started of what materials I was going to use, where I was going to get the materials, but it was a huge learning curve. That's the fun thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to, even if something's in your wheelhouse or passion, you're still going to learn and be required in order to be successful to learn a huge amount. And the difference between pita chips and hotel is huge, but it was fun learning about each of those businesses.
I'm seeing a lot of parallels too in those stories, like with what you said about standing in the factory and selling to PepsiCo and being like, wow, how did we get here from where we started? There was a lot of stumbling along the way with Ocama, it sounds like, with the wrong architecture firm or the 7 to 8 years of acquiring the land and having the legal team. Was there ever a moment where you were just like, forget it, I'm not going to do it anymore, or this isn't going to work?
Yeah. Yep. Same with the pita chip. Our the thing with and I keep on bouncing back and forth, but there are so many parallels with the making the pita chips. The way we did it, and which was so hard for people to copy, is we put our oiling and seasoning on before they were in the ovens. So all of that stuff is combustible. So every once in a while you get a fire, and we had gigantic fires. So there were times where we burned down almost half a factory, and I think we were done. And then we somehow rise from the ashes. And the same thing here. In the beginning, we had just started to build, and a hurricane came, and it really did quite a bit of destruction. And that's with an entrepreneur, you need to be able to get past those difficult points in time because it's all down on your shoulders. The
Yes.
highs are highs, but the lows are very low because it's all you. You're not working for someone else.
Right.
That's your sweat and tears and money. And then COVID came, and that was challenging, obviously, for everyone. And
Sure.
so yeah, lots of ups and downs. But now we've had some high profile people come to visit us some musicians and some businessmen and some pretty important people, and they've come away loving the place. And
Yeah.
Travel and Leisure is going to be doing an article soon, and the New York Post, I think we've got an article coming out. So it's fun to see that we're getting some notoriety and that it's being realized that this vision that I had is actually coming to life.
Those are the mountaintop moments, I imagine, like the acquisition by PepsiCo, but to get to 255-star reviews or have a celebrity in-house or a profile in one of the biggest travel publications. Those are those highs you were talking about. But when you are seeing all of the land washed away by a hurricane or half of your factory burned down, what is it you think that allows you to keep going? What is it that you keep telling yourself? Or do you give yourself a few days of being like, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to pout about this?
Yeah, no, you can't. There's no time. Again, you're not working for someone else. So I think the entrepreneurial spirit, that's what makes you have to have the DNA to be an entrepreneur, and you have to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if you really don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
It's there somewhere. You have to have a thick skin. I tell people you have to be able to suck it up and say, okay, that really stinks, but I'm going to go on. I'm going to make this work, because it's easy to fold. And there's tons of things that can go wrong and will go wrong. And you just have to be able to pick yourself back up and keep at it.
You mentioned earlier that, you're hoping to partner with a larger hotel brand, potentially for expansion. So really, I just want to hear what you think of is next for Ocama. Is this a one-off passion project that, like you said, you're going to bring in a great partner for? Is it a start of a broader hospitality play for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not, I mentioned I have a daughter now, a 2.5-year-old daughter. So
Yes.
it's important. I'm blessed to be able to work from home, but the hotel is a big responsibility and the management of that property. I would like to have more time, and my expertise. I think, this size I can manage, but to really do what that property, really begs for, takes a bigger entity than me. And I'd love to be a part of it, even if I'm some design sense of it, and have a sense in the restaurant or something. I don't know how that's going to play out exactly. Right. And if we'll keep the Ocama brand, and or will it be rebranded? So there's a lot of ways it can go. It's sort of, is it going to be a card or a pita chip or what? So that remains to be seen. But I see it, at least for the short term, being in a partnership with a great brand, a luxury brand that cares about the environment and expanding, and then we'll see how that goes from there.
Amazing. Mark, I want to ask you the last 3 questions that I ask every guest. And the first is, what is the best hospitality experience that you have ever had?
Yeah, that I was thinking about that. And it's funny. It was easy to think of bad experiences. There's always something that you get let down with a little bit, or a lot of times it's hard to find that perfect. But I'm going to go back to my one that sticks into my mind that was great, is back to the Stacy's days. And I was doing an awful lot of traveling in the early days. But again, don't have any money. We're trying to build this pita chip company, and I'm going out trying to make sales. So I I flew out to Las Vegas for either a machine show, some sort of show.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted. We were working all the time back then, through the weekends, through the nights a lot of times. And I was exhausted. I get to Las Vegas late at night. I show up at my hotel and I go to check in, and the girl at the concierge could see in my face. She must have read something that this guy's had a tough day.
Yeah.
And so she's, said, checking in. And I said, yes, gave her my name. And she said, hang on a second. And she disappeared behind a door. And then she came back a little while later with a smile on her face and gave me a special key card. She said, I think you're going to like this. She goes, I was able to upgrade you. So you're going to take those elevators over there. I had my own special elevators to my own penthouse suite. And I opened up these double doors, and it was something you see, on a movie. It was just incredible.
Yeah.
And to be, we were struggling with the company. Just to get a good night's sleep was tough. And to have them do this for me, I mean, it just stands out in my mind, and it went a long way, that's for sure.
Those are those powerful hospitality moments of it. It wasn't really about the room. It was about that she saw at that exact moment you needed just a little recognition, a little pat on the back.
Yep. And she knew I wasn't a high roller, or I wasn't, that was, they weren't going to use it. Obviously it was late at night. So so that was great.
I love that. And what about the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Alyssa, my partner, she reminded me, because I was asking her about it, and because I could find some, but nothing. And we stayed at a place. I don't want to name a name here, but we stayed at this very well-known place in Vermont, and I'm sorry, it's in Maine, and expensive and very New England. And we got a special room because we had Ivy. She was probably 8 months old then or something.
Yeah.
And so we got a standalone suite. And it turned out, we didn't get a lot of information about what it was. So when we got there, it turns out this suite, which was more like and I've been to the hotel proper, and it was nice, but the suite was more like a trailer, it seemed like to us.
Oh, gosh.
And it was way away from the restaurant and the hotel proper. So really inconvenient trying to get and they were doing construction on the unit next door. So, and they wouldn't, we asked, you said, we have an infant and she needs to sleep. And they said, well, we need to do this construction. So they had construction going on the whole time we were there. So it was just it was a horrible experience.
Oh God. Every parent listening and watching is nodding and going, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. I mean, the reason we got this standalone is because we would have peace and quiet, and we got the opposite of that.
Exactly.
And then we had to go all the way, take a little road trip to get back to the restaurant each time. So, you get your good ones, you get ones that you go to and it surprises the heck out of you. And then you get others that you've got the bar set high and they disappoint. We've gone to some little bed and breakfast where we've had some of the best times and the best service and the best experiences because they're so personalized.
Exactly. Final question for you, Mark. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, maybe a person, a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Yeah, hospitality, I think means being cared for and but not overly, not in sort of this very natural way by people that are passionate about it. And you can tell it's not a job for them. They actually love doing it. So it's a very comfortable experience, but little things like having people know your name or having them know your preferences before you go there, which is what we focus on a lot at Ocama, is really getting to know the guests without being nosy and without being intrusive or bothersome, really having the guests' expectations made and laid out for them so that when they get there, they think, this is exactly how I would want things, and this is wonderful. I don't have to think about anything. They've really thought of everything, and they care enough to follow through with this. So I think that's what it means. But also, I think nowadays sustainability and seeing that a restaurant or a hotel cares about their staff, are the staff happy? That's huge because they're the representation of your brand and your name. And you can go to a place where you just feel the staff probably isn't treated well and probably isn't respected, and they're not having a good time, and that makes your experience not good. But when a staff member comes up and they're excited and they're enthusiastic and they're having a good time, it really elevates the experience.
Definitely. Any person or brand or any experience that you've had that delivers that?
I think as far as the big brands, I think Six Senses and the Mon, they do a great job of the customer service. But then some of these small bed and breakfasts that I've been to, just really how they go out of their way to make you try to feel at home. And a lot of times that's the tough thing, is scaling and that'll be the tough thing with Ocama, is scaling it. It's not going to be a big hotel, but taking an 8 villa place and turning into a 60 hotel key and 20 residences, but keeping this level of privacy and intimacy and a very happy staff that's cared about. And that's the tough place, is scaling.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely.
It's not a pita chip. It's not a factory. These are people. And so that's the challenge.
Mark, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
You're welcome. That's been a pleasure.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. After all of Mark's incredible success, it might be surprising to hear that he never set out to build an iconic CPG or consumer packaged goods brand in the first place. His goal back in those early days in Boston was much simpler: run a food cart. Maybe if he was lucky, he would open a restaurant someday. And if he really made it, pay off his student loans. What unfolded, of course, was something far bigger than he ever imagined. He did eventually pay off those student loans and then some after Stacy's was acquired by PepsiCo. But even then, he didn't rest. He immediately started mentoring young founders, crediting collaboration over competition as a huge part of his own success. And of course, he began dreaming about what was next for him. I appreciated his honesty about how bumpy the entrepreneurial path really is. Yes, along the way, there are the highest highs: owning a state-of-the-art factory, landing a game-changing partnership with Trader Joe's that meant he never had to raise capital again, selling to PepsiCo, and now with Ocama, hosting celebrity guests, earning hundreds of 5-star reviews, and being featured in Travel and Leisure. But he also mentioned how you're the one to shoulder the hardest moments along the way, like when half of your factory burns down, or when a hurricane washes out land that took you 8 years to acquire. Mark's resilience comes from accepting that the journey will never be smooth, but choosing to stay focused on the vision anyway. So, for those of us who have a dream, who are building something, or are trying to follow a passion despite what others think we should do, Mark's advice is clear. Don't overthink the destination. At the beginning, you don't need to know if it's going to be a cart or a pita chip. You only need to take the right next step, and then, like the name Ocama suggests, to listen.
And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media @sweetsuccesspodcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.